Destruction or rebirth, chaos or transformation, breakdown or breakthrough. If we talk about one of the most feared and misunderstood cards in tarot, it's the Tower. That image of lightning striking a tall structure, sending two figures tumbling down. It hits a nerve in all of us because we've lived it. That moment when your perfect relationship explodes, your stable career crumbles, your core beliefs get shattered. Your first reaction is panic. Your stomach drops like those falling figures. But here's what nobody tells you when you're in free fall. This isn't your ending, it's your upgrade. The Tower doesn't just destroy, it reveals, like a truth serum for your life. It shows you exactly what wasn't working, the relationship that drained you, the career path that was wrong, the lies you told yourself to stay comfortable. And now, you're free. The psychology of the Tower isn't about doom scrolling your future. It's about understanding why breakdowns create breakthroughs, how to spot your Tower moments before they strike, what your soul's been trying to tell you through the chaos. This isn't magical hocus pocus, it's radical self-honesty. Those bricks crashing down, they're the walls you outgrew. That lightning, it's your wake-up call. Welcome to Mantis Library. This is where we explore these transformative moments together, where we learn to see the Tower not as something to fear, but as the beginning of your next chapter. Let's begin. We like to think we have things figured out. We build our lives like towers, brick by brick, decision by decision, until we've created something that looks strong, stable, and unshakable. But here's the thing about towers. They're only as solid as their foundation. And sometimes, without realizing it, we've built them on beliefs that were never really ours. The Tower card in tarot isn't just about destruction, it's about exposure. That bolt of lightning, that's truth, raw and undeniable, striking right where it's needed most. In an instant, it reveals what we refuse to see, the cracks in our carefully constructed reality. Maybe it's the moment you realize the job you dedicated your life to is draining you dry. Maybe it's when a relationship you swore was forever suddenly feels suffocating. Or maybe it's that one conversation, that one loss, that one unexpected shift that leaves you staring at the ruins of what you thought was certain. The figures falling from the Tower aren't just people, they're identities. The roles we play, the masks we wear, the stories we tell each other about who we are and what we need. When the Tower collapses, so do these illusions. And yes, it's terrifying. When the things that once defined you crumble, there's a moment of pure, gut-wrenching panic. Who am I without this job, without this relationship, without this belief? But that's the trick of the Tower. What's falling away was never really you. It was a version of you built on expectations, survival mechanisms, and borrowed truths. And now you have the chance to build something real. Psychologists call these moments identity crises. But let's be honest, crisis doesn't even begin to cover it. It's a full-body, soul-shaking reckoning. It's standing in the wreckage of who you thought you were and realizing there's no going back. And yet this is where the real transformation begins. Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in psychology, put it best. The Tower represents the constructed self. What shatters is illusion, not truth. The Tower doesn't destroy you. It destroys the parts of you that weren't real to begin with. Think about the times in your life when everything fell apart. In the moment, it felt unbearable. You wanted to grab the pieces and stack them back together, to make things go back to how they were. But if you really look at it, weren't those the moments that pushed you toward something better? The job loss that led you to a career you actually love. The breakup that forced you to rediscover yourself. The failure that humbled you just enough to see a new path forward. It's no coincidence that people often say, "That was the worst thing that ever happened to me," but also the best. That's the tower at work. But here's the thing. Transformation isn't gentle. The tower doesn't give you time to prepare, to pack a bag, to ease into change. It rips the floor from under you, leaving you no choice but to rebuild from the ground up. And that's why we fear it. We're wired to resist change, to cling to what's familiar, even when it's hurting us. But when the lightning strikes, there's no room for pretending. The illusions we held onto so tightly are gone, and all that's left is the truth. And truth is a double-edged sword. It cuts through the lies we tell ourselves, but it also sets us free. Because the tower isn't just about loss, it's about release. That job, that relationship, that belief system that crumbled. Maybe deep down, a part of you knew it wasn't right. Maybe you felt the cracks long before the lightning came. Maybe this moment of destruction is the very thing you needed to finally let go. So what do you do when you're standing in the rubble? First, you breathe. You remind yourself that this is not the end. It's the beginning of something truer, something stronger. Then you look at what's left, what survived the fall, what still matters, what pieces feel like you. Because that's what you rebuild with. Not the expectations others placed on you. Not the identity you clung to out of fear. But the raw, undeniable truth of who you actually are. And that's the secret of the tower. It feels like destruction, but it's actually transformation in disguise. It strips away everything false so you can finally see what's real. And yes, it's brutal. Yes, it hurts. But in the end, what remains is something that can't be shaken, can't be taken away. Because this time, you're not building a tower to keep yourself safe. You're building a foundation that will actually hold. The moment your tower starts shaking is precisely when most people make their biggest mistake. They panic. They scramble to grab onto anything familiar, trying to rebuild what's crumbling, rather than asking why it's falling in the first place. But what if we told you that chaos isn't your enemy? That this seeming disaster is actually your psyche's most sophisticated navigation system? Carl Jung said this beautifully. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. That pain isn't punishment, it's information. Like a check engine light for your soul. It's signaling where you've been running on empty. Where you've been lying to yourself. Where your life has become misaligned with your truth. Consider the tower moment as your psyche's version of a controlled demolition. That relationship that ended abruptly, it wasn't random. It was the universe clearing out what was preventing you from experiencing real connection. That career setback, not a failure, but a forced pivot toward work that actually ignites your passion. The trick is learning to read the wreckage. When your stomach drops during the fall, it's not just fear. It's your body signaling where you've been betraying yourself. That anger rising up, it's pointing to boundaries you failed to set. The grief washing over you, it's highlighting what truly mattered all along. As psychologist Fritz Perls put it, Fear is excitement without the breath. The same psychological responses occur in both. It's our interpretation that makes one a crisis and the other an adventure. This is where most people get stuck. They mistake the tower's destruction for tragedy rather than transition. But trauma researcher Dr. Peter Levine makes a crucial distinction. Trauma isn't what happens to us, but what we hold inside in the absence of an empathetic witness. In other words, it's not the collapse that breaks us, it's the isolation during it. This explains why two people can experience nearly identical tower moments: job loss, divorce, financial ruin, and one emerges shattered, while the other is reborn. The difference lies in whether they interpreted the event as something happening to them, victimhood, or for them, initiation. When we shift from asking, "Why is this happening to me?" to "What is this here to teach me?" the entire nature of the experience transforms. Practical awareness begins with a simple but deep question in the midst of crisis. What's being revealed here? Not what's being taken, but what's being uncovered. That entrepreneur whose business failed might discover she's pursuing success for her parents' approval, not her own fulfillment. The suddenly single man might realize he's been using the relationship to avoid facing his own loneliness. These revelations aren't comfortable, but they're invaluable. They show us where we've been living out of alignment. Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron explains this beautifully. Nothing ever goes away until it has taught us what we need to know. The tower ensures we finally pay attention to the lessons we've been avoiding. Here's where it gets fascinating. Your brain will resist this reframing. Our neural pathways are wired to perceive sudden change as threat, which is why the initial tower moment triggers fight or flight responses. But neuroplasticity research shows we can rewire these reactions. Each time you pause mid-panic to ask, "What's actually true here?" you're building new neural circuits that interpret disruption as opportunity rather than danger. This is the alchemy of awareness, turning leaden fear into golden insight. Psychologist Tara Brach describes this process as recognizing the fear, pausing, then asking, "What is this moment calling for?" rather than, "How can I make this go away?" The patterns being challenged in tower moments follow predictable archetypes. There's the perfectionist, whose tower of flawless achievement collapses into the realization that worth isn't earned through performance. The caretaker, whose identity, built on fixing others, crumbles into the revelation that love isn't conditional on usefulness. The achiever, whose ladder of success narrative disintegrates into the understanding that external validation can't fill an internal void. These aren't random. They're the universe's way of dismantling the false selves we constructed to feel safe in the world, but that ultimately kept us from our true selves. What makes tower moments so transformative is their inevitability. Like a snake that must shed its skin to grow, we're forced out of outgrown identities. Psychologist Abraham Maslow explained it like this. In any given moment, we have two options: to step forward into growth or to step back into safety. The tower removes the option of stepping back. It's life saying, "You've played small long enough." The discomfort we feel isn't the pain of destruction, but the growing pains of evolution. The most practical tool during a tower moment is what we call rubble reading. Instead of immediately scrambling to rebuild, sit with the debris. Journal about what emotions arise when you look at the wreckage. Not the story about why it happened, but the raw feelings beneath. Anger often points to violated boundaries. Grief highlights true values. Confusion signals where you've been following others' scripts rather than your own wisdom. This is where the most spiritual bypassing occurs, the rush to find the lesson without fully feeling the loss. But the psychologist Carl Rogers was clear. The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. True transformation requires honoring both the sorrow of what's gone and the possibility of what's emerging. Like a tree that draws nutrients from its own decaying leaves, we grow by metabolizing our experiences, not by running past them. This is why tower moments can't be shortcut. The breakdown is the doorway. What emerges from this process is what we might call tower vision, the ability to discern between structures that support your soul and those that confine it. People who've been through multiple tower moments develop a kind of X-ray perception. They can spot a shaky foundation before the first brick is laid. They build differently, not to impress others or numb fears, but to honor their evolving truth. The reason tower moments feel so catastrophic isn't about the actual event itself. It's about what the event threatens to reveal. Our minds construct elaborate defense mechanisms to protect us from uncomfortable truths. And when those defenses get shattered, it triggers what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. That gut-wrenching feeling when reality contradicts our deeply held beliefs. We'll twist ourselves into knots to maintain our illusions, which is exactly why the tower has to strike with such force. Gentle nudges wouldn't penetrate our denial. Think about how this plays out in real life. When someone loses a job they hated but stayed at for security, the initial panic isn't just about finances. It's the terrifying confrontation with all the excuses they've been making for years. The relationship that ends suddenly isn't just painful because of the loss, it's agonizing because it forces both people to see the red flags they'd been ignoring. This is why these moments feel like existential threats. They're not just changing our circumstances, they're challenging our entire self-narrative. What makes these experiences so transformative is the biological alchemy that happens when we stop resisting. Neuroscientists have found that when we approach, rather than avoid, difficult emotions, we activate different neural pathways, literally rewiring our brains to handle challenges more effectively. Psychologist Rick Hanson explains this as taking in the good, not by denying the pain, but by being present enough with it to extract its wisdom. This is the crucial difference between trauma and transformation. It's not what happens to us, but how we process it. As Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl wrote in Man's Search for Meaning, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. The process of emerging stronger follows a predictable but non-linear path. First comes the disorientation, that feeling of being untethered where nothing makes sense anymore. This is actually a neurological state called liminality, the threshold between who we were and who we're becoming. Anthropologists have studied how all meaningful rites of passage contain this phase of chaotic uncertainty. Then comes the insight phase, those startling moments of clarity where we suddenly understand patterns we couldn't see before. Finally arrives the integration, where we start rebuilding, but differently this time, with the new wisdom woven into our choices. The most profound shifts happen when we realize that what we're most afraid of losing is often what was already lost. We just hadn't admitted it yet. The secure job that actually stopped fulfilling us years ago. The relationship that had become more habit than heart. The self-image that no longer fits who we're becoming. This is why tower moments, while painful, often bring a strange sense of relief, like finally putting down a heavy weight we didn't realize we'd been carrying. As David Whyte writes in Consolations, all of our great journeys of courage are about the leaving of one place and the setting out for another. What makes this process so challenging is that our brains are wired for consistency. We crave familiar patterns, even when they hurt us, because the known feels safer than the unknown. This is why the period between towers, when the old has fallen but the new hasn't yet formed, feels so terrifying. But it's in this very space that the most important work happens. Like a caterpillar in its chrysalis, what appears to be disintegration is actually metamorphosis. Neuroscientist Candice Pert's research on molecules of emotion shows how our bodies literally store unprocessed experiences. Tower moments force us to finally metabolize them. The ultimate paradox is that by surrendering to the fall, we gain control in the most profound way, not over circumstances, but over our response to them. This is what psychologist Carl Rogers meant when he said, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change." Acceptance isn't passive resignation. It's clear-eyed seeing that creates the possibility of authentic transformation. Every spiritual tradition has some version of this wisdom. From the Christian concept of dying to be reborn, to the Buddhist teaching of annihilation of the ego, the tower is psychology's version of this universal truth. So, when you find yourself in freefall, remember this isn't a deviation from your path. This is the path. The breakdown isn't preventing your breakthrough. It's the necessary prelude to it. As mythologist Joseph Campbell reflected, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. The tower simply removes all other options, so you have no choice but to enter. And when you do, you'll discover what was there all along. Not the fragile, constructed self you thought you were, but the resilient, authentic self you've always been. The ground you're falling towards isn't oblivion, it's your true foundation. And the landing? It's not an ending, it's your real beginning. With that, if you've enjoyed this video, make sure to drop us a like and consider subscribing. And remember, when your tower starts to shake, don't panic, just pay attention. The fall isn't your failure, it's your rebirth. Until next time, stay curious, stay mindful, and never stop exploring. We'll see you again in Mantis Library.